Hello, everyone, and welcome to what I think is going to be a fantastic episode of Training Unleashed. First, on behalf of the Learning Network, I want to thank the audience for being here. I also want to thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. Without them, I wouldn't have a show. And let everyone know that we now are on YouTube. Check us out at Training Unleashed Network, and you can actually see the show, which is actually a lot of fun. With me today, I have Curtis Bateman. He is the managing partner, senior VP of international direct offices. Did I get that right, or I botch it?
Pretty darn close. Yeah, we'll go with it.
Yeah, with FranklinCovey. FranklinCovey is an amazing organization. We'll talk about more, but they are really leaders in how management and leadership works. And Curtis has got an incredible background. I don't normally talk about backgrounds, but I think it's important to the context of this. He actually spent, I think he said, 10 years working with the company with Who Moved Our Cheese, helping organizations implement change. And then part of his relationship with FranklinCovey, he co-authored the book Change, How to Turn Uncertainty into Opportunity. And I am a huge believer in adapt or die, and that great companies change and innovate. So let me just start off with, how do you look at and recognize a company that does truly embrace change versus people that give lip service to it? What is an identifier that tells you, you know what, this company's really got it?
Yeah, I think the frontline leaders, if you can see in the frontline leaders um, an ability to understand and lead their people through change, you'll have an organization that's pretty good at changing. Obviously, I could pick probably 30 things to give an answer to, but I really think that's where you make or break successful change. So if you have an organization that is agile, that has change as a competency, that's where you'll see it. You'll see it right there at that part of the organization.
Yeah, I always love the place where you go to somebody at the front line and what is their authority of decision making? And the answer is nothing.
Then you got a problem.
You got a problem. Okay. You're working with a company, they recognize they need change.
Yeah.
How does change start?
Well, I guess my challenge back, I'll answer that, is what organization doesn't need change? I would be surprised for somebody to say, oh, we don't need any change.
I love that, because I think you're either you're green and growing or ripe and rotting.
Yeah, yeah. So the question was, where do you start? There are a couple of schools of thought. One is you start top down, and others bottom up. I think the real answer from my experience is you recognize that there's an opportunity to get better at how you lead change and how you experience and go through change, both from a leadership and an individual perspective. So the approach we've taken, that I've taken, is to start where you are and use the tools and the models and the ideas to go wherever you need, rather than it being linear or top down or bottom up. It's all right, get a tool set, get an understanding, and then use it at every instance where you're experiencing change.
Which leads perfectly to the question, what tool set would you consider using? Like a SWOT analysis? What are your favorites?
Well, I've developed with partners and colleagues over the years about 30 different tools. And of course, things like a SWOT analysis can be really valuable. I've got modified versions of start, stop, and continue. So there are some fairly commonly used tools that have particular application with change. But what I've really done is tried to say, if I'm a leader, I don't have a lot of experience, or maybe I'm not comfortable leading change, but I know I need to get into this and lead the change. I've built a set of tools, and together with my co-authors, we built a set of tools that say, if I just pull this out of the book and I read it, will the tool create value? Will it be easy enough to use it? Will it work? And so my approach has been to really simplify and get tools that foster dialogue and help leaders, no matter their level of experience. And so there are tools along the whole change journey. We can probably get into some of those, but we've gone down the route of building some very custom specialized tools that connect with their methodology.
So I guess I'm going to push you more because we got training professionals and people wanting to maybe look at what those activities are.
Yeah.
So do you have like assessment tools that allow people to see what's working and not working? And by the way, you mentioned, what to stop, what to start, what to keep doing. One of my favorites, by the
Yeah.
way. Um,
Let me talk you through two of them. I'll just give you that they're short enough and easy enough that I'll talk you through two of them. One of the things that teams usually experience with change is this long list of all of the new things we could or should be doing. Um, and then there's also the, oh my goodness, how do we fit all of that into the schedule? Which is where this version of start, stop, and continue comes in. Because you've got to give yourself permission to stop doing what you've always done to free up time and capacity to be able to focus the energy on the change. Otherwise, as leaders, we're just asking our people to do more, more, more. And so one of the big ideas is, what can we take off of our plates? So here's another tool that we use a lot. Usually teams realize that there's a set of obstacles. And so I've created a tool called hurdles, quicksand, and brick walls.
love
And
the name.
yeah, that's fun. This tool is meant for a team meeting or a leader to say, all right, hurdles are things that we can jump over, but we certainly have it within ourselves to address those obstacles. And so you say, all right, these obstacles are in the hurdle category. Then you've got quicksand. Slow us down. They could really become dangerous if we're not careful. But there is probably collective resource in the team to say, here's where it's going to slow us down. Here's where we're going to be stuck. But perhaps collectively, here's what we could do about it. And brick walls represent obstacles outside the capability of a team to address. And so that's where the leader takes their assignment to say, let me go figure out how I can get answers or resolutions from other parts of the organization. So why is a tool like that? Pretty simple. Why is it valuable? Often with change, people feel overwhelmed. And because they feel overwhelmed, they get paralyzed. What this tool simply allows them to start doing is to say, what are the things I can work on? What's within my circle of influence? And what's clear on the other side within my circle of concern? I can't do anything about it, but I need an answer. And my experience has been, once we start to give people the ability to parse it that way and take action, they just start to feel better because they make progress, they can engage, they realize they have influence. And so that same is true with the start, stop, continue. It says, oh, I can free myself up. What can I focus on? Or, the start, what's new? It gives you the ability and permission to say, that's where we choose to focus. We're going to contribute to the change, but coming up with new ideas and doing something new. So those are two. I can talk you through more if you'd like, but those are two, and they're fun and they're easy, and they really lead to a nice dialogue.
So what I'm really hearing you say is the key is to get clarity and understanding, because that really helps you. I love the brick wall. I think a lot of times in training, we hit a brick wall
We do.
because we in training are really, hopefully, agents of change. And we sometimes recognize the things that need to be changed sooner than others because in some ways we're feedback.
Yeah.
But at the same token, we're not empowered or rightly, I'm not like saying we should be empowered, but
But there's
a
a
lot of,
limitation.
right, there needs that brick wall needs to be something that senior management determines is going to be broken.
Yeah.
Just, as an add-on a little bit here, I find a lot in companies and training departments in particular, there are lots of stops to do. Programs that were started 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and just keep doing them and doing them. And when you start evaluating what's working and not working in your current programs, there's lots of opportunity for people to clean up.
That's
Uh,
so true, Evan. You know, one of the tools I'll tell you quickly on a third tool that we use to help with that. We have a tool called the Change Hunt that says there's this change happening, our team's being impacted by it. We're going to go talk to every connected potential stakeholder, somebody in marketing, somebody that's a vendor, somebody that's um, part of our distribution network, and get their input on if this change is happening, what about it could make it valuable for you? And you'll find that there are a lot of stop and start feedback points that come from that change hunt where you're actually soliciting input from people that will be impacted by the change, but may not be directly involved in it. So it's just a way of surfacing
yeah.
more feedback.
Well, I also think when you get feedback and you ultimately start moving forward, you're also going to get supporters because they're going to feel like they were engaged and listened to. And a lot of times when somebody decides to make a change and the people affected by the change never felt they were heard, you might build more resistance.
Without doubt, it's human nature. That's
Yeah.
human nature. It's one of our basic premises is that um, we need people to make these changes happen. And so often change is focused on process. But if we acknowledge that humans are involved in the change and our default setting is often to push back because we don't have the clarity we need, if if that's the starting paradigm, then how do we unpack that and provide something that creates value for our people to engage in the change process and help make it work faster and better?
Hmm, I like that. Let's talk about countries and culture and change. So for a brief time, uh, I managed a company that was in Great Britain. And I found politeness to be a hindrance for change. Um, how is change different in different countries and cultures, and what can we learn from that to help us improve the ability to change?
That is both an insightful and fabulous question. And, you know, Great Britain's near and dear to my heart. I do a lot of work there, about a third of my time. So I live what you're talking about. And if you go to Asia or other parts of the world, you get even different cultural reactions. So, in my experience, I've had a chance to do change work in all of those places, different countries, different cultures. And there is the consistent shows up in our change methodology, which says when we introduce a change, there's always a period of disruption. There's a point where we're inviting everybody to choose to be part of the change. There's the space where we're adopting and implementing the change that has setbacks and difficulties. And then hopefully there's a space where we get to the real benefit and the value of the change. So that predictable pattern happens in all of those cultures. What's unique is that the way you lead your people through it requires some adaptation or some understanding of your people. So that's why I was talking about the role of first level leaders in your very first question. They know their people. They're the most trusted leader in the organization because of proximity and relationship. And so the path through the change is the same, the journey. And it's those individual first level leaders that should know how to use the tools and the methodology, and then just adjust them inside the cultural differences to work. And that's where I've seen the very best impact. Call centers in India, newspapers and publishers in Hong Kong. You know, the list goes on, where there are differences in industry and culture, but the methodology and the tools work because front level leader learns the capability and then they apply them to their team. So that's not telling you how to solve the the issues for Great Britain like you're describing, but in principle, that's what happens in each of those cultures.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing you saying is it's the same methodology, but presented based on the cultures, so it's heard and felt appropriately.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
But
even if I were leading change in Britain versus France versus China, as an American, I would use the same tools, the same predictable pattern, but I would just approach based on the culture. And
yeah,
it works. It works.
looking to supercharge your training, let's talk about learning management systems. That's right, LMS. Don't have one? We should talk. Have an old one? We should talk. Have one not doing what you need? We should talk. At the Learning Network, we take LMS very seriously. In fact, we have 4 different options because not everyone's needs are the same. We have state-of-the-art features, and we can make your training experiences special, interesting, and exciting. So check us out at learning.net. Hey, by the way, we also have a lot of off-the-shelf content by ourselves or our partners, Open Sesame, amazing authoring tools, all kinds of reporting tools, everything you need to have your learning management system take your company to the next level of training. Come to learning.net today. You've spent your entire career in change.
I have a lot of it.
So this is sort of a softball question, but what are the kind of key things you've learned or what has changed in change? Maybe that's a fun question.
What has
What has
changed in
changed in
change?
change?
I actually like both versions of the question. Yes. So what has
Go ahead
changed?
and answer. Go ahead and answer both.
Yeah. What has changed in change? I think if you went back 20 or 30 years ago, go to the 80s or the 90s, um, we we often thought of change as we need to work on the process. And if you're not careful, some of that thought, that mindset lingers in more experienced leaders or even in some consultancy firms. And when we focus just on the process, we ignore the most important resource that can make that happen. And so instead of building capability and competency with our people and leaders, we're forcing them through it. So I think what's changed in change is there's this growing realization that people are the secret weapon to make it happen well. If you can engage your people, they can figure out all the process. They're really smart and talented. You hire smart and talented people. So rather than have somebody tell you, oh, go do these 5 things on the checklist for the change, say, here's what we're looking for, here's the journey, here's how we're going to enable you, and let them do all that. They're capable. And so for me, it's that transformation in the last 30 years that says people are at the root of successful change, and the better job we can do leading them and developing their capability, we get better outcomes. So that's the first one, that I think is, what has changed with change. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say that's happened.
Yeah. So what are the big ahas or best practices that you see in change?
Hmm. I think the big ahas are every organization. I guess this is the other question. Every organization, not every, but a lot say to us, "Oh, we're going through this change, but we're so different." And when I go in and I look at what's going on, they're experiencing the same predictable pattern. We're taking people out of their status quo. We're announcing a change. We're really disrupting them. We're asking them to engage in the change. We're giving them the opportunity to help with it, looking for a better outcome. And and so my response pretty frequently in those kind of new client conversations is, I know you're unique because your people, your leaders, but the process you're going through is predictable. So why is that an important message? I think it feels less threatening to people because if they think we're so unique, nobody's been through this, it's uncharted territory. It feels really threatening and daunting. But if you can say, listen, you're going through and you're experiencing a very predictable change experience. What you're thinking, feeling, and even doing maps pretty clearly to this journey. So figure out where you are and what tools and conversations you can have. And and then you'll find that it's a predictable pattern rather than the abyss of the unknown. And
Hmm.
that actually helps people feel a little bit more at ease when they realize that's the case, because then they're not experiencing something totally uncharted. They just realize they've got their own version of that journey going on, and it helps people start to feel like they can reassert some control and engage in a process that has a known outcome.
I like that. I think it would give people comfort. So as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm thinking about change comes in two forms.
Mm,
Probably comes in more than two forms, but in my question, it'll have two forms, and you might tell me they're more than two, and that's perfectly fine. But one form is led, meaning the company recognizes it wants to change. It sees an opportunity for innovation.
mhm.
And the other is forced, where
Yeah,
market things are happening and the company has no choice but to make change.
yeah.
How are they different? And what can we learn from it?
Yeah, they are different. They both activate the same journey, the same process, but they are very different around how you create engagement and buy-in from your people. So force change, right? We've all lived through one. When the pandemic happened, there were all
Yeah.
sorts of force changes. When there's new regulation, there's new, those are all situations where change is forced upon us. And there's no question that we certainly like changes that we choose better than changes that are forced on us. And I think in answering why that difference, it gives context for how we handle both. If I'm choosing a change, let's say I choose to change to a new job, that's a fairly significant change, but I've chosen it. And even though the change might feel significant, I've chosen it because it has potential value for me. I'm doing it because I want career advancement, or I want more income, or I want to live closer or further away, or I want to travel. Whatever the reason I've chosen that change, I see potential value in it. And so when I choose a change, I've thought of all the things that could be great for me. Organizations feel that way too. They're more able to articulate why it's valuable, why it's meaningful. And so that instantly creates a vision. It starts to tell a story of why this change is a good thing. Whereas when change is imposed, external or forced upon us, human reaction is to oppose it. Change imposed is change opposed, I like to say. And when that's the case, it's an interesting starting point, because businesses still have to wrestle with that and implement the change. So then the question becomes, okay, how do we figure out what's changing? Why is it changing? Where could there be value? And what can we create as a potential outcome that would create value? And as you do that and you start to create the story, that's a tool I have. It's called a case for change. What's the story of the change? The why? And then what are we moving from and to? Well, in Change We Choose, we know all of that. It's an easier narrative. And in Change Imposed, we have to work to create that narrative. But in both scenarios, we need to document it. And once we have that narrative and what we're moving from and to, old actions, old behaviors, new behaviors, old outcomes, new outcomes. In the process of figuring that out, then we take change imposed, change forced, and we can start to create a storyline of where the value is. And that's where both of those then intersect and they move through the change journey.
Yeah. I love the concept of a story. I think creating a picture, uh, a theme, those things have impactful change. Impactful, not change, impactful impact. Okay. I want to talk about the frontline person for a moment.
Hmm.
I do a lot of keynote speaking, and I constantly get someone in the audience who says, I'm low level in this organization. I love what I hear you say, but I don't know how to sell it up. So I'm a frontline employee, maybe a frontline manager, not a lot of power, and I see a need for change in an organization that is not receptive, or maybe the word receptive is wrong, doesn't seek input. What advice would you give to that person?
I just want to acknowledge where that person is and what they're feeling, because that is so true. It happens all the time. So I don't want to ever be dismissive and say, "Oh, here's a quick, easy answer for you," because this is a difficult question. Um, and what I find so fascinating is when organizations successfully tap into the front line for ideas, that's where some of the best change initiatives originate. I've got story after story where when you unleash that capability or that contribution, pretty significant transformation can happen. So I want to acknowledge that that's real for people. I want to acknowledge that they have great ideas because they live it every day, right? They're on the front line of it. Um, and so now to maybe give some ideas that I know have to fit inside the context of those realities for them. First of all, there is this predictable pattern for change. And the reason I mention that again, this is the third time I've mentioned it. The reason organizations and individuals change is because they want a better outcome. They want something better from the change. So often individuals talk about the change and they don't have all of this experience to create a business case or tell you, they say, we should do this. And it's easy to be dismissed saying, why would we do that? So I would say if you can move to the end of the value discussion there and say, here's a place where we could create more value. And to do that, we might need to do these things. So position your suggestions in where they're going to make an impact on the outcome, where they're going to create value, not just on the what should we do differently. And if you can do that, you're going to get somebody's attention to at least engage in a dialogue. They may help you understand that they've thought about that and there are reasons to not do it, but it may also be something that they hadn't thought of, and it creates the seed that germinates and leads to change happening. So think about how you position it. That would be my
Yeah,
first
I,
response.
I like what you're saying, and also to focus on the outcome more than the actual change itself, the
That's right.
benefit. So, Curtis, it's been a great discussion. Clearly, you know so much about change, and um, you know, certainly recommend everyone here to read your book. It's a simple name, Change. Um, People also, I'm sure, love to know more about Franklin Covey, because the
Yeah.
more I learn about Franklin Covey, the more I'm impressed, not just in your leadership position, but the fact that you really, you cover the world. And, as you head up most of the world for Franklin Covey, you're the right person to answer. Tell us a little bit more about Franklin Covey, about yourself, and what types of things your company offers and you offer.
Yeah. I love that you've mentioned the global footprint. We do operate in about 150 countries. So that's cool. Maybe if I start with what brought me to Franklin Covey. I had my own business for years doing this, and why would you leave your own business and come to Franklin Covey? And there are a couple things in our mission and some foundational beliefs that for me are quite compelling. So our mission is that we enable greatness in people and organizations everywhere. And I'm quite compelled by that. I think our audience today is probably quite compelled by that too, because it speaks to the idea that we have this inherent belief that people are capable and that they want to be great and that they have a choice to be great, and that if we share with them principles that are relevant and universal, that we can help them become better. And for me, that's inspiring and motivating to think, how can I help individuals, leaders, and organizations become the next better version of themselves? For me, that's such an inspiring thing. And it's part of what draws me and so many of my colleagues into Franklin Covey. And I've touched on this, but we really try and focus in four key areas as an organization. We want to develop leaders, exceptional leaders at every level. So I mean, you've heard me talk about that today, first level leaders, and we work with senior leaders. And so much of what we do is developing that leadership capability in organizations. to unleash greatness, right? We want to instill great habits of effectiveness for individuals. We really believe in individuals and their ability to create transformational change within organizations when they learn some of the principles that we have to share. Um, we focus on building high trust cultures. We believe that trust is a significant and foundational component to how you do all of that. If I trust my leader, I'm going to move through change so much faster, right? So, and then last, but certainly not least, we focus on helping organizations execute on their most important goals. I was on a call just this morning, talking about this area where we've helped over 58 million commitments be made inside organizations to further advance their most important goals. That's so inspiring. I love it. So, you know, I suppose a lot of that might feel like, whoa, it's quite aspirational, but that is part of what draws me and so many to Franklin Covey. But from the aspirational to the work we do with clients where it becomes really practical, things you can do that will improve your work that day, that will improve your effectiveness that day, that will make you a better leader today and tomorrow. So, individuals, leaders, trust in cultures and organizations, and then making sure you're actually delivering results on your most important goals. So anyway, that's Franklin Covey. There's a lot more we could talk about, but if you go to franklincovey.com, you can see client stories, you can see testimonials, you can learn about the different solutions we do to
So
achieve
Kurt,
outcomes.
could you talk a little bit about your ability to work with all different size companies?
Yeah,
Because I think a
yeah,
lot of times people think, and I was listening and going, this sounds like something big companies do, but you're not just about big companies. And maybe
that's
talk
true.
about that a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate the prompt on that. So first of all, if you move outside of North America, so I said we're in 150 countries. There are a lot of small economies that have small and medium-sized enterprises, and we work globally with organizations like that. And we generally probably start with about 100 or more people. So I mean, I suppose that excludes dentist offices maybe, but
Yeah.
but that we work with lots of small and medium-sized enterprises. And what makes that particular group so appealing is you get to work with the whole organization, and you'll get to work with all the senior leaders. And so you can see all of these things that we do applied to the organization as a whole and create all this momentum and acceleration. Because when you get into a big company, right, making um, some of the work we do have an impact. You might make it work for a team or a division, but organizations are so large and distributed, there's this longer ongoing process. So we work across the whole spectrum, but some of the small and medium-sized enterprises is where the really fun stuff happens because you can see the whole thing play out within a matter of months, and then the transformation that happens as a result of it.
Well, Curtis, this has been a great episode. As you know, we always end the episode with, if you had one tip to share with the audience, what would your one tip be?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that for the last little bit. I'm going to stick on the change theme today. My one tip would be um, the the change model, which I've referenced. So that's like this. Got to go find it. You can find it. It's not hard to find, or it's in the book or on Franklin Covey's website. But it's really simple. And here's I guess my pro tip: learn it and use it with your teenagers or with your significant other or your friends. It works in every context, and it leads to some of the most um, rich and engaging conversations, especially as you use it in your personal life. These same principles apply. I love watching or having somebody come back to me and say, I used it with my partner. I used it with my aunt or my teenager, and it made such a difference. And for me, that's really pretty special because it means it's a principle that works in every facet of our life and it adds value. It helps. It helps. And so I would just encourage you, take 2 minutes, go find it, and then share it with somebody else at a pub or a bar or
Okay,
something.
for clarity, because you talked about a lot of different things, which particular tool were you talking about?
the change model, the foundational model itself.
Cool.
It's just a modified J curve with a couple of labels on it, and you'll see that it's pretty significant in terms of even in personal conversation.
Cool. Well, on behalf of the Learning Network, Curtis, it's been great to have you. I want to thank the audience. I also want to thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. Remind everyone, check us out on YouTube, Training Unleashed Network. Everyone have a great day.